I would describe transfer as the ability of a learner to make productive use of their knowledge and their skills in new and improved ways, based on past experience, but in response to new challenges.
I think we took the term transfer, well, the word transfer, very directly. I just thought, what knowledge can be taken from one language, one culture, one academic setting, whatever, and then transferred into another? And where does this transfer become problematic, and where it can be fine?
Explaining or defining transfer is a tricky enterprise, largely because it draws from so many different fields. And so it means very differently if you're talking about it to people who are in student affairs as opposed to people who are inside certain disciplines. And that's before you get to people who study transfer generally, as in education or psychology. And that actually is even before you get to people who are engaged in thinking about transfer without necessarily naming it that way. I'm thinking here of people who hire college graduates who are very interested in college graduates being able to transfer what they've learned in the college environment into the workplace. And I'll say that even in other spheres of activity, transfer is very much of interest to people. And there was an article in the New Yorker a couple of years ago that looked at why some quarterbacks who are Heisman Trophy kinds of quarterbacks don't do so well in the NFL. And if you're not watching Tim Tebow right now, you should be, because that's a classic case of somebody who has not been able to transfer to the NFL what was such a successful practice for him at the University of Florida. So that's a long-winded way of saying that we have interest in transfer from almost every domain that we can think of, point one. Point two is that education is predicated on the notion that students will transfer, that they will carry forward what they've learned in middle school to high school, that they will carry forward from high school into college and so forth. But it's also the case, point three, that transfer, as we are coming to understand it in writing studies, which is my field of endeavor, or at least what I've persuaded people I know something about, which is as good as having a field of endeavor almost, is that it's not the natural process that we think it is. And in part that's because writing is not a natural process. But the same thing is true for civil engineering is not a natural process. Sociology is not a natural process. So there are learned processes. Sometimes people find it easy to transfer from one domain of activity to another, but frequently they need some kind of assistance. And so the question that we as educators take up is, what kinds of assistance do we want to offer to students? At what point do we make that assistance available? And then what use do students make of that assistance? So transfer, I would suggest, is at the heart of a good deal of human activity and is certainly central to what we do in the academy.
It's a connection-making capacity, and the ability to make connections and then do something with those connections. It's using prior knowledge for sure. That's one form of transfer, and we all do that. But it's also doing something with that knowledge, extending, deepening, repurposing, remixing, usually in other contexts. And I see transfer, I mean, we often talk about it from course to course. Say general education, we would hope that the purpose was that there was some transfer and integration of knowledge in most universities' general education courses. But I also see it happening within courses and within subjects and experiences, from text to text, from personal experience to university experience. But it's recognizing those connections, thinking about expertise that you have so that you can refer to it in new situations, but not letting it dominate those situations. there's always got to be a kind of change.
So transfer is really a foundation of a lot of our educational systems. We assume that what students learn in one context or what we teach in one context, that they will take into another context and apply or repurpose or use in that new setting. But we don't necessarily have a lot of evidence, or we didn't have a lot of evidence that that actually happens. And so a lot of the folks that have been studying transfer have been looking for evidence of that, not only student learning in the one context, but what do students do with it in the next context? How are they able to reuse, repurpose, remix, integrate, apply? Lots of words for it, but what are they able to do with that learning in the next context that they go to, or that they go to at the same time?